Hello and welcome to a special edition of the Game Business Show, our best of 2025. It was our first year, really. We produced 78 official shows, 13 micros, 4 bonus editions, plus 135 articles on the Game Business website. We now got over 18,000 subscribers. We've had more than 2.5 million listens, views or reads. It's been a phenomenal year. It's beaten all of our expectations. We are very, very happy. And to wrap everything up, we thought we would go back over our episodes and pick some of our favourite ones. Now, our first draft of this would have led to about a 3-hour episode. We wouldn't do that to you, not this close to Christmas. So we've had to be brutal. We've had to select what we think were the most interesting and entertaining moments from the past sort of 9 months. And to begin with, we're going right back to the very first interview we recorded. It was with Shams Jorjani, the CEO of Arrowhead, the team behind Helldivers 2. Now, during that chat, Shams told the story of what happened after the shock success of Helldivers 2, namely the game's rapid decline and then return to strength. Here's Shams telling me that story. This is the thing. It was a shock success.
Yeah.
You've had to go on this learning journey, right? And obviously we've got a publisher in Sony that, isn't a live service expert either, or at least these sort of games. And it sounds like it's been a baptism.
That's exactly what it's been. It's been, I think, it took us all by surprise. And then I think Sony knew and we knew that we were not fully a full-fledged live service studio, because we absolutely were not. It took 8 years to make this game. Arrowhead was always used to doing post-launch support with DLC and stuff, and quite a lot of it, but it's a different thing to be a live service. So there was a mad scramble to kind of keep up with the intense success. And, the saving grace was that this was a troubled development cycle. It took 8 years to make, and it shouldn't take 8 years to make a game. But during those 8 years, a lot of stuff was made and put to the side, and we put them in what we call the cellar. So after the mad release of Helldivers, we were like, oh shit, we need to release stuff because the players are screaming for stuff. So all the stuff that we planned, we had to kind of get out faster. And then we kept reaching into the cellar, pulled something out, and we're like, okay, what if we just, fix this up? And that's, we just kept jamming out stuff. And that was the saving grace that allowed us to keep the momentum going those first few months. And we peaked at around 750,000 players. And then over time it went down, and then the honeymoon kind of ended, and we started running out of stuff to do. And we also ran out of stamina. So when I was asked to step in May of last year, they gave me the keys to the car, and they told me, we're going off on summer vacation because we haven't been taking a lot of vacation over the last few summers. And I was like, we're running a live service game. People can't be off for the next 3 months, but that's what happens in Sweden because we take our summer vacations very seriously. So it was rocky there, and then we kind of came back, but then we had, the Sony account linking kind of an adventure. And it turns out that when you've made a game that trains the community to gather around communal goals, they were very good at showing what their pleasure and displeasure. So we went down to like 30 in user score. And usually that's the death knell for a game, right? But we came back from that. And then we fumbled with balancing and the focus for the game. And that sent us all the way down to 19%, I think was the lowest.
Oh, wow.
And like games that get 19% user score do not generally recover. And maybe the lowest point during my tenure so far, there's going to be many more, I think, was during the summer when everyone was away. Our user score was down to 19. And I had to get on a call with Herman Hulst and explain to the CEO of Sony why things were in the state they were and what we were doing to kind of recover. And I had to say the awkward, truth that there is nothing we can do in the immediate short term to resolve this. But in the long term, we have plans that will get us back on track. And we issued a 60-day plan that put us back on the track. And we did an update and an update and an update. And I was very much inspired by No Man's Sky and the team over there that had a similar kind of journey. Very hyped, then bombed, and then they put their head to the grindstone and just updated the game. And since September, we've been on a very good trajectory, but we've been just pendulating between it's so over and we're so back, and it's become a meme within the community. But we went from 19 to 94 positive on Steam.
Oh, wow. They're like the MCU of, but in like one title.
Exactly. And this is it's exactly 12 months since launch, but all of these things I described to you happened during the last 9 months. It's been a real roller coaster, and we're still coming to grips with the phenomenon that this is. Like, Arrowhead and myself have been involved with releasing successful games, but it's always hard to gauge how much of a phenomenon it becomes and how much of it wins hearts and minds, right? And it touches people in a lot of different ways, and that's why we love it.
That was Shams. It was such a good interview. He actually joined us again in November. I do recommend listening back to both of those episodes. Now, one of the big games of the year was Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 from Czech developer Warhorse. Now, we had an interview with the vocal and sometimes controversial game director, Daniel Vavra, who is the co-founder of Warhorse. And he had an interesting view on storytelling in games and related it to similar challenges that exist in movies. Here's a clip from that show.
What do you think it is about the series that has resonated so well with players? Because it started off, I think you said the second game was what you wanted the first game to be, that was your objective, but the first game really won people over in a big way as well. So what is it about it that's been so enticing?
I'm really actually surprised that so many people are surprised by the success of the game. I since the beginning, I was absolutely sure that it's a recipe for success if we do it right. I like similar games. There are very few of them. For some weird reason, nobody makes them anymore that much. So generally, we are in the same genre, let's say, as Witcher or Red Dead Redemption games. Actually, we pitched the game to publishers as a Red Dead Redemption with a sword 14 years ago. So generally, it's a strong story, but at the same time, big open world, a lot of freedom for the player. And the story, which is very important, and that's where a lot of games today fail, in my opinion. The story has to be good, by which I mean cool characters that you can relate to, and humor, and something they can kind of relate to and feel that it's them. And many games today, when they have a story, it's just like some fill-in, some random bullshit, or they try to tell the player some message or something. But usually, there are very few games like that. And every time such game is published, it becomes very successful. So it's kind of weird that nobody...
Yeah.
Where do you think people rate them?
We get stories like that in film, though, all the time, right? It's. I think I know what you mean. Any theories as to why you don't get quite so many games like this? Is it cost?
I have a lot of theories. I have a theory about it, of course. It's probably a little bit controversial, maybe. But generally, if you look at the movies, at least in the past, Hollywood studios are based very differently than games industry. You have producers that choose some script, and then they kind of try to find money, and they assemble the team, and they give a lot of control to the director. So basically, the person who controls everything is the director and the producer. And they give chances to even very young and sometimes even unexperienced people. So I don't know, Bryan Singer was very young when he did the first X-Men, for example. And they give him a very important franchise, reboot of superhero movies, and he was a young director at the time. So Hollywood was, at least in the past, was willing to risk and try to do new stuff with new people. And they knew that it's about good director rather than some committee. While in games, you have a company that's making games, and there is a board of people who are deciding stuff. And director or writer is just one of them, and very often doesn't have the final word. So there is much bigger risk than it will become some basically corporate product rather than the piece of art.
Yeah.
This environment also kind of repels creative people a lot. So and still for a big game that similar to ours or RDR or whatever, you need a lot of money, a lot of resources, much more than for a typical movie. Let's say today, you can say it, and it takes much longer. So you can shoot a movie very quickly, and then there is a lot of post-production, of course, but generally you assemble the small, quite big team, but for a short time. While in games, you have a large team for years. So this work for hire that works in Hollywood doesn't work in games industry.
I see.
It comes all from that. And also, and that's the controversial part, a lot of people think that the cultural wars, they are here. But generally, a lot of people think that it's some evil management that's forcing the creators to do something. But I would say that it's the opposite. It's coming from the creators, actually. I would even dare to say that some companies are not liking it and they don't know what to do about it. But generally, we can see it now even in the movies that they are a little bit, or sometimes a lot, kind of for a non-existent audience, I would say. Even in Hollywood, they are currently making movies sometimes for non-existent audience. And if you look at the old movies from the 80s or 90s, I don't know, Spielberg movies like E.T., Extraterrestrial, it's set in some small town with quite normal people. Everybody can relate to them. They are behaving like normal people from small town. And when you look at a lot of movies today, they are about people from California, rich people from California very often, that have very different problems that normal people have. So there is this kind of difference between what, basically, I would say that the creators are making movies about themselves, or they are using cliches that they see in other movies, and they kind of stopped doing movies about regular people that are still existing in the majority of the world, USA or whatever. So I would love to see a movie from Montana, for example, and tell me Sam. I don't know about any movie from Montana. And when there is Sam, I usually like it when there is not, when it's different setting and stuff. And the same can be applied to games. When you look at the games from the 90s, the scale of topics and different genres was, I would dare to say, larger than it's today.
That's Vavra there with his views on stories in games and Hollywood. Now, there's been a few moments where someone says something that makes me go, I'm sorry, what? And here's a great example of that from my interview with Indiana Jones developer MachineGames.
You know, that's always the hard part. But they want to consider it a hobby. And, you know, there are other hobbies at MachineGames that trended. There's a fight club going on in the basement. We have a lot of...
What's hang on.
Yeah, our animation director is jujutsu, like really high level, and he's been holding this thing where people can get down during lunch and get beaten up. There's a lot of people who are into sports shooting.
Okay.
As you can tell from Wolfenstein, a lot of interest in weapons generally, both inside the games and outside the games. So it's a very nerdy culture, but outside of games as well.
I love that.
Lego building Thursdays.
Do you get beaten up in the basement?
I haven't been down to the basement to get beaten up yet. No, we've been very busy on the game.
Yeah,
for the last couple of years.
So there we go. MachineGames love a fight. What can we say? Now, back in June, I spoke to Epic CEO Tim Sweeney. I asked Tim a question developers ask me a lot, which is around them wanting to have more control over the monetization of the games they make in Fortnite. At that point, developers got a cut of the revenue made from items sold in the Fortnite store. They couldn't add their own monetization. Now, Tim gave me a great answer as to why they don't want to do that. But here's the thing. They are now doing that. That just shows how quickly things are changing in this constantly evolving metaverse space that Epic are trying to push forward. But either way, I actually really like Tim's original answer, even if he has somewhat changed his mind since. So here it is.
So I spoke to a load of devs at GDC about UEFN, and one of their chief, perhaps, issues or little peaks was has been the control Epic has over the monetization, and there's not the variety of revenue streams that I think some of them would like. Is there any view on changing that, or any plans to change that?
Yeah, Fortnite's built for players first and foremost. Players love the ability to buy outfits and then use them everywhere they go. And love the fact that Fortnite is a game where everybody has an equal chance. You know, there's no pay to win, and there's no scenario in which spending a lot of money gives you a benefit over other players who haven't spent money. It's all entirely a merit-based game system. I think if you look at how Roblox monetization works, when you're spending money in an experience, you're mostly buying items that are allowed to only work there. You go play another mode or go into another island or another Roblox experience and it doesn't work there. Yeah, it's something we really are worried about as a concept. If that becomes the way gaming works, then it feels there's going to be a lot of offers made to customers that are just poor deals. And the idea that like, oh, somebody bought a better game in this genre, now I'm going to go to that game and have to buy everything again. Yeah, that's not what players want. And then you get into pay-to-win mechanics where people who spend more money have a better chance of winning. You get into a lot of scenarios where there are loot boxes or things that resemble loot boxes, and you play paying for a chance at something rather than buying some specific identifiable thing, you know. And generally, we've rejected those forms of monetization for our own games, and we really think that we can build an economy that's better for players and that rewards creators more as a result of the increased player trust and kind of avoid falling into the pitfalls of the pay-to-win and loot box mechanic games, right? And if you like, Roblox is still in the pretty early stages of developing monetization at scale. You know, it's increased dramatically in the last 3 years, but it's not really played out or reached the stages. If you look at mobile platforms, you really see where that path ultimately leads, and it's not a pleasant place. It's a place in which the most greedy games with the most aggressive pay-to-win mechanics and, you know, the most loot boxy mechanics, almost outright gambling in some cases, make the most money per user in the economy where Apple and Google and others have driven it to be dominated by advertising. To reach users, you must spend a lot of money on ads, and they soak up more and more of the revenue through advertising. You find the greediest games spend the most money on ads, and then move up and up the charts until they completely dominate the ecosystem. And now the entire ecosystem is, well, to use Cory Doctorow's term, enshittified by just the pervasive incentive of developers to adopt bad commercial practices. So we're really, really worried about that enshittification loop that emerges in systems like that. The ads are already emerged in app stores, and I think we're starting to see some aspects of that in robots. So we're very much in tune with keeping the Fortnite economy fair and welcoming to everybody and avoiding those sorts of practices.
That was Sweeney there speaking to us shortly after State of Unreal back in June. Now, one of the conversations all year has been around the battle for player time. Analysts have been saying to us that actually games aren't our biggest threat. It's things like TikTok taking up so much people's time, soaking up all those hours. Now, I had an interview with the CEO of Zynga, Frank Gibeau, and as a developer of mobile games, I wanted to get his view on how we can combat the TikTok threat. This is what he said. You were talking about the single-digit growth in the West and the challenges there. And one of the things that seems to be, it used to be a time where games was a rival to everybody else, like film and TV and all the other entertainment mediums were looking at games a bit crossly, stop taking all our audience and all our time. And now we've got one in terms of like short form video in TikTok and things like that. What do we do about that? How do you counter that?
Well, I think I start at the fundamental level, like linear content versus interactive content. I think they both have places in people's lives. They engage and reward you emotionally and creatively and competitively in different ways. So I think that one doesn't obsolete the other necessarily. So that's kind of the first thing I think about. The second thing I think about is what can we learn from these new platforms like TikTok and Reels and other things. What we found is that if you don't set the hook fast in a game, if it's not challenging very quickly, you're gone. So if you're watching quick videos and you're swiping through them quickly, I do this all the time myself, it has to hook you very quickly. And traditionally in mobile games, the thought was, hey, I got to wait 80 levels to get to the challenge, right? I want to ease you in, get you to play. It's a very permissive, nice environment. But what you're finding in interactive right now is games that are more challenging earlier, Elden Ring on console, Color Block Jam on mobile, it sets the hook really fast on this is hard and challenging, and therefore it compels you and you attach to it much quicker. So we think much more aggressively about day 1, 3, and 7 in terms of the user experience and what degree of engagement and frankly monetization as a result of a lot of this short form video that's been coming out. We also mine a lot of it for ideas. If there's a particular type of video that's working or something that's fun and funny, that can be inspiration for a game design or a game concept. So I think there's a symbiotic thing. I think obviously there's a zero sum. I only have so much time in the day. Am I going to watch TikTok videos or get a few turns in on our games? So I think there's going to be kind of a constant one-upsmanship on that. But I think there's a lot of crossover there that people don't necessarily talk about.
Frank was great throughout that whole interview. Check it out if you have the time. Next, one of the big AAA startups, ProbablyMonsters, broke cover this year. And the games were not remotely AAA. It was a proper shock to see this new studio pivot so drastically as a result of the market. Here's CEO Howard Ryan sharing insight into that decision.
You know, if we were talking back in 2020, I would have said, hey, we've got, AAA publishing deals signed. We're building, big games, and all of our games are built that way. I would say today, I think for the industry, for us, one size fits all isn't the way we're going. I think it's not the right way to go. And so we're still building what I would call long-term games, but also building midterm and short-term games. And the two games I want to talk about today a little, one of them is a short-term game. It's called Storm Lancers. It's coming out on the Nintendo Switch.
Oh.
The other game that's more of what we would call a midterm game for us is called Ire, a Prologue. We kind of think of it as maybe this is the pilot episode for what we hope is a longer running franchise. It represents a little more time and investment into a game than a short-term game would to us.
So, excuse me if I'm being naive. What do you mean by short-term and mid-term?
I think a short-term game for us, I would say, first really is quantified by taking a game idea you're inspired by and looking at the tools and tech that are available to today and going, what would this be if it was a game we shipped next holiday? And so for us, for our short-term games, they're really games where we're looking at, less than 18 months of development time.
Wow.
And I think for both the games that are coming out this fall, they're very approachable, easy for consumers to play and hopefully love. But, we have to wait for that part. And both at a $19 price point.
Really?
And both games, we think a skilled user in the genre can finish the first time through probably in less than 10 hours. We think they're games where you can find more depth when you play. And certainly when we're talking the side-scrolling roguelike, it's a very replayable, very fun round after round game as you go into it.
This seems to me quite the pivot from, I was reading all the old press releases, all the old stories that we wrote about it. It was AAA, big games, AAA development veteran talent, such as yourself, obviously. Mm-hmm. I know the market's changed. I know we can probably talk about that. But is that vision, you've had to change all of that?
In our long-term games, you're still going to see games that have bigger investments, games that probably have bigger teams. So I think today for us, when we talk about the best path to market for a game, in the old school AAA space, it would be, build a studio, right? Hire 75, 100 or more, depending on what publisher you're building for. And then, train that team to ship the game you're going to ship. And I think that takes a long time. There were a couple of op-eds I did when we announced back in the day about the pluses and minuses of AAA. And really, the goal at the end was to start with AAA under the assumption that that was the safest path to take to get the company established. The bigger budgets would allow us to have good benefits and good quality of life and more predictability. And certainly it's a space that I felt like I understood pretty well based on my background, and then have good relationships in the industry to help move that kind of thing forward. But yeah, I think the first few years of the company for sure, and we had great success signing AAA deals, and we have great teams and great projects underway. But the market moved, and I think today we'll still build long-term games and mid and short. But I think the world today is one where the best path to market is also identifying the best resources, and those resources might literally be just about anywhere as you go through it. And I think that's part of the evolution in the industry since 2020. Game developers are working from all kinds of places they weren't working from before, and tools and tech have allowed us to connect in real time to people all over the world, which has really opened the door to pulling the right talent into the games at the right time.
Shortly after speaking to ProbablyMonsters, I spoke to another person from the AAA world, Call of Duty and Dead Space alumni Glen Schofield. This was back in August, and the excitable creative director put up a valiant defense of AAA. But one of my favorite parts of the interview was hearing his story behind building Dead Space within the EA machine, and whether or not Dead Space was really a AAA game. Here he is.
I don't know when I started hearing that I was, my games were being labeled AAA. I'm like, you have any idea what making Dead Space was like? Yes, I was at EA, but at that time, EA published something like 60 games a year. Mm-hmm. And internally, I mean, it was, they had studios in we had 5-6 games just down here in Redwood Shores, but they have studios all over the world. And so in order to get your game, even like Dead Space, I made a deal with the president at the time. And I said, I need 18 to 20 people, put me in a room. Because I was leaving after Bond, and I just didn't want to make another Bond game. So, no offense to Bond. And so I made a deal with the president at the time, Paulie, and just give me 18 to 20 people, put me in a corner, and leave me alone for a year. Because the big companies, especially back then, had a tendency to go, I need 10 of your people. Just as you're about to hit a great milestone or anything, well, anybody comes in and takes your people. So I was used to that and hated it. And so we wrote that down, and I got to pick the people. So, I had already had established a group of people, and then new ones every game and stuff like that. So, making Dead Space, then after that, is trying to keep it established within the company. So people have heard of it, right? You are marketing inside your own company. I did a number of things. I made a calendar. I made a scary freaking, with just kind of the concept art that we had. I was like, I spent I don't know, $4,000 on it or something. And we put dates on it, and like famous dates, and then we pass it out to the executive. We kind of hit it. Holy crap, did I get in trouble for that? But at the same time, now they're starting to hear Dead Space. Then I started taking posters. We made some posters, and we'd put them up. Like we'd go to the big, with any internal show. Like we would have one in, I shouldn't say show, giant meeting, executives would get together.
Yeah.
We'd go there and put these posters by the urinals in the men's room. So that, whenever they're going into the bathroom, they're seeing Dead Space. And so it was just, we did this guerrilla marketing to stay relevant, but it didn't take long. It took about 6 months. Well, it took about 3 months to scare my boss. And that was important. Because as soon as he was always on board, his name is Nick Earl. I mean, he wasn't like a boss. He was like just this dude that had more power, and he just blocked things for me. He let me make the game for a while, just.
Yeah.
And then he was there with me pretty much the whole time, because it took over a year to get it greenlit. And this is after having McConaughey come in and going, this is amazing. But man, that's about as indie as you can get inside a giant company.
Yeah.
Fighting for your dollars. And then in the end, dude, you get this. They do this internal, so that they're psyched because EA, they're showing people Dead Space. People are like really excited for it now. But then they do this internal thing where they have this third thing where the chief creative officers, there was 2, I guess, at the time, come in and they look at all games. Mm-hmm. And they were comparing ours to Mirror's Edge because Mirror's Edge was the other new game coming out.
I remember, yeah.
So internally, we're about 5-6 months before ship, both games. Something like that, it could be. And they give Mirror's Edge a 90 and Dead Space a 72.
Yeah.
This is internal, right? And we're like, and the team is devastated. And we got that in 5-6 months. And how do you talk to them? That's part of your job. You have got to explain to them, no, these guys are wrong. It just sucks the wind out. What does that do, though? Internally, they go, well, let's give Mirror's Edge more money in marketing than Dead Space. I think we had something like 12, 14 million in marketing, which is the people going, that's more than my budget for making the game. Yes, but we're talking EA and so is that AAA?
That was Schofield there. He also pitched an idea for an Egyptian-based horror game, which I really want to see made. So I'm just putting that out there. Next, we went to Gamescom and we spoke with NCSoft America boss, Jeonghee Jin. NCSoft revealed a number of live service shooter games in Cologne. It's investing in things and in projects at a time when most other companies are simply not doing that. So I wanted to find out why.
So you're being a lot more ambitious at a time when the rest of the games industry is being more conservative, being more cautious.
Yeah.
What's your thinking behind that? What's the why?
I think we're really at a point we really want to kind of jump out. I mean, I think the game industry just everywhere has been not very active, like in investment and like a growing project. There are a lot of cancellations, layoffs for the past couple of years. And we were the same. We actually did a lot of restructuring efforts, especially last year. The company has gone through a lot of changes, but I always believe that's also the time, exactly the same time, we really have to work on investment. So there is definitely cautiousness internally, though we're not just going aggressive for, external opportunities. I think we are just working on all these things together. So when we were still cutting on things, we also had to announce some, project cancellations last year. So when these were happening, we also just really have to just go out and find, other opportunities. That's what I believe, because the industry has been always cyclic. If you think actually this is really kind of deep down of the cycle, I think that's exactly when you also really have to find a new opportunity, because a lot of teams, good teams, are, I'd say, struggling because, there's no new fund or there's no new, active investment. I think this is really a good time for somebody like us who really has to, find a good growth momentum once again, especially outside Korea. Just find a good partner just to work with and just find a good project we can, support and make big. So not only being aggressive, I think we are also being very careful about, budget and what project to grow and what project to, hold on and evaluate again. So we're also being very careful, but I think we just don't want to show this ambition right now.
That was our interview with Jin around their Gamescom reveals. Now, at the end of September, myself and my producer Richard attended a special party to celebrate PlayStation's 30 years in Europe. And during that, we did the first interview with former president and CEO Jim Ryan since he left Sony. But how is he doing post-Sony? Well, here he is.
We have now Jim Ryan with us, the former president of PlayStation. Jim, I'm going to ask you the same question I asked Chris. Who are you and what did you do on the start of the PlayStation?
So I'm now an aging retiree. I left Sony 18 months ago and I'm loving it.
Also part of that PlayStation 30 piece, I chatted with former senior producer Martin Alltimes and former VP of software development Juan Montes. And they told me some surprising things that very nearly happened during those early PlayStation years. And here they are.
My overabiding memory of Sony was great games and great parties.
It's always been.
We had, and it's legendary, and I don't think they've ever been topped. Those first generation PlayStation pies were legendary.
That's been the abiding answer to that question, bud.
Yeah, it really was. It was amazing.
Ask one more question. Can you tell us something about that period, that time that perhaps many people might not know about that PlayStation?
Well, I'm sure other people might have mentioned it. We had, Psygnosis were an established publisher. They weren't at Sony Computer Entertainment, so we had to build all our developer relationships from scratch, and we had no reputation. So the reason why in the end we ended up establishing relationships with completely new developers was because we had no other choice, and it was a real struggle at the beginning. And the one story I would share, which I think there's one of the best kept secrets is we almost bought Bullfrog, Peter Molyneux's company. One of the producers there was a friend of Peter's. And I remember sitting opposite him when he was having his phone call. And Peter pitched Dungeon Keeper, a game that never came out called The Invincibles, which was a superhero game, and another thing. And at the end of it, we decided that it was easier and cheaper to buy them. And that's how they ended up being bought by EA.
Oh, really?
I think something that probably not many people can know is internally within development studios, we were creating a football game. At the time, the technology was there. It was pretty good. And we were very close, to getting the FIFA license. Very, very close. And at the end, we decided not to pursue it for, having a good relationship with a third party. But we were very close to being in that space.
It's a bumper episode, that PlayStation history video, and it's well worth watching for anyone that's interested in the history of this industry. Now, in October, I travelled to Evo in France to do what I didn't know at the time would be the last ever interview with Katsuhiro Harada as the boss of Tekken. Harada announced that he'll be stepping down from the Tekken series after 30 years just a few weeks ago. Now, during that interview, I asked him what he would like to do next, and his answer was far more worthy than just making more games. Here's a short clip.
Is there anything you'd like to do next? Is there anything that you go, right, just for, I can't imagine doing anything but Tekken, but do you have anything else you'd like to do?
なんかやりたいことある？鉄拳しかやってこなかった感じ。
いや、僕、鉄拳だけと思われてるんですけど、割といろいろやってるんですけど、実はいろいろ作ってきてるんですけど、ちょっと最近腎臓が悪いんで休みたいな。そう、朝ごはんから禁止もうアルコールも飲んでないけど、実は30% ってツイッターで言ったんだけど、34% 低下してんのかな。
そんなのなんか出
るんだよ、データで。で、50代にしてはちょっとだけ平均より下回ってるのね。34% 落ちてるって言われるとちょっと怖いじゃん。ちょっと休養して体を取り戻したいなって。
啓発みたいになんだっけ？
そうだね。いや、なんかでも、だから腎臓って調べたら復活しないらしい。そうです。いや、でもいろいろ僕自身はなんかやりたいなと思ってることはたくさんもちろんあるんですけど、はい。もう今目の前の仕事でいっぱいいっぱいって感じですかね。どうですか？
So Harada was just mentioning that, he does other projects, as he's mentioned in the past, outside of Tekken as well. So he has been able to do many different things. But he said recently he just wants to take it easy a bit. As he mentioned on Twitter, his kidney function is down by 30-some%. So he's feeling a little bit tired. He wants to recover, but apparently kidneys don't really recover that much. So he's stopped drinking alcohol and been improving his diet. So
that was Harada-san there. Now, one of our standout interviews of the year was with Patrick Soderlund, the CEO of Arc Raiders developer Embark. We could have picked any clips from this, but we thought one of the more entertaining stories was around the studio's first game, the finals, and what happened there and how that influenced Arc Raiders. Here's a segment of that interview.
I think we kind of had a hunger to create something different, something that wasn't, an FPS or a game where you shoot other people necessarily in the same way. And we decided that, that's when we started building on Arc Raiders and what was then Arc Raiders. But then obviously, there's a reason why we built these types of games for so many years, many of us. And I think we kind of got an itch to go and, explore that segment again. And I remember telling some of the individuals who were working on it that, listen, we won't go into this space unless we can come with something that can serve up and have a meaningful innovation and that brings something new and fresh to the market. Otherwise, why bother? We're not going to go and try and build, a game that's already out there and try and do it better or our version of it. That makes no sense. We wanted to build something that brought something new. So that's, and then we had a long, multiple conversations around what could that be, how would it be executed, everything, and that eventually led to the finals. Mm-hmm. We also knew that we wanted to try and maximize the amount of players playing the game, and being a relatively small studio, we felt like free to play is a business model that could make sense as long as we try and implement a version of free to play that's fair, that is just towards the players, and that we don't take every angle to monetize them, but it's built on kind of a fair, trusting relationship towards our paying and playing customers. Whether you pay or play or just play, it doesn't really matter. We launched the game. We were surprised at how many people played it, to be honest. We had over 20 million downloads very quickly, and people, came to play the game. So I think that we had obviously created something that people had an interest in playing. Mm-hmm. That was obvious. We mission complete on that aspect. But then I remember it so well. We were all away during Christmas. I remember I was on a trip somewhere, and very addicted to my phone and reading all the data that was basically hourly. We saw revenue numbers, player numbers. We saw everything coming in, on it. So I was watching my phone constantly during the break. And then January 7th, I remember, was the day when kind of everything started declining rapidly to a large degree. We were completely fine then, and we thought that we were, this is, that we've created a monster. And then it took about a month, and then people started doing something else. They stopped playing the game to a large extent, and we lost massive players. The player numbers went down very quickly, and we came back and started thinking, what's happened? Has something else launched? And it took us a while to fully understand why that was. I think we got to a place where it was evident that there wasn't enough content in the game. We didn't do a good job enough onboarding players. We didn't do a good enough job explaining the game modes. We had a problem with our menu and UI HUD, everything. And then I think what was evident also for us was there's no quick fix. There's nothing that we can do. There's not one thing that is wrong that will make this fix. That fix that creates a solution that then all the players are back. That wasn't the case. We quickly realized that wasn't the case. So we had to be very methodical about it. We had to go back and talk to the players as best we could, mine all the data, and then data is great, and it can be your best friend, but it can also be your worst enemy, because it's what you do with the data that dictates the outcome. And everyone talks about data, but what people should be talking about is actually what to do with data, and how to analyze data, and what decisions you make on something that is inherently creative and a piece of entertainment, right? So we had to learn how to do that our way, and it took time, but. And we tried many things. We thought that we were lacking a game mode, and we had to fix that. So then we added something that we thought was awesome. The terminal attack game mode, we loved it. And I was thinking, this is it. Now everyone's going to come back, and everyone, most people didn't like it.
Oh, no.
So okay, now what? What do we do now? So that was kind of the constant loop that we had to go through in order to understand, to get to a place where we felt like we made progress. And then we did make progress. I think we were, by the people that stuck to us and still played, which, there were still a lot of them. They could see what we were trying to accomplish. I think they applauded the effort. And then we slowly started seeing more and more players kind of either come back or come in and try the game. And then our, retention mechanics were better, and got better over time. And now, for the last, I would say 6 months, we've been on a steady growth trajectory again, and we're growing the franchise. We're seeing, and the game is profitable, which is a good thing, and we feel good about it. So we're sitting here planning, not months ahead, but years ahead of what this game can become and what to do with it. So I know that that's probably a relatively unusual story. A lot of games we've seen come out and then go through the same thing, and unfortunately, they cease to exist, especially in the free-to-play market. So I'm a little bit surprised that we managed to make the changes that we did, and that we got to a place that's not now much better. It doesn't mean that it will last forever, but it means that we've done something right.
Well, is there anything from that you're able to take into Arc Raiders that you learned?
No, of course, a ton. Just launching with more content, more depth. It's not necessarily about having more than 3, 4, 5, or 7. I mean, it's not the amount of maps necessarily. It's how you utilize the content. It's the depth. What do people do? The first thing you have to understand is when you play the game, the second to second, if you don't nail that, there's no game. So then you talk about, traditionally you talk about what happens every minute in the game. You need to nail that too. Those things you can't negotiate. Unless you have those figured out, no one is going to want to play the game. I think that for both Arc Raiders and for the finals, those two, to a large extent, we figured out. Then you go into hour by hour, and then day by day, and then maybe week by week, month by month. That's where the problem starts, and you need to really make sure that you have things for players to do, things for players to accomplish, things for that you have an ever-evolving game that feels like you want to come back to, that punishes you enough, but not too much, right? That is rewarding yet not too rewarding, and that feels fair yet sometimes unfair. And that's the balance you have to thread, right? And as a developer, it's I'm not saying that we're going to get it right 100% for Arc Raiders, but I think that the learnings that we've had has taught us a lot. And I also know that in the events or cases where we don't get it right, I think that we're going to be much quicker to jump on those problems and cure them, or try to cure them.
That interview really is a must listen, and it turned out actually to be part 1 of 2 interviews. A month later, I spoke with former Nexon CEO Owen Mahoney. Now, Owen was responsible for Nexon acquiring Embark. So having heard the story from the perspective of the developer, I thought it'd be fascinating to hear the other side of it. Here's a bit from my interview with Owen.
The whole business at the moment seems to have turned and looked at what Patrick and the team have been doing at Embark over at Arc Raiders.
Yeah.
You must be feeling pretty delighted about that as like a great example of the strategy and your belief on where the industry's headed.
Yeah, I mean, Embark is a really good example of, so first of all, to answer your question, yeah, I'm thrilled by what they're doing. But I will tell you that the history of that deal is very interesting, and it probably says a lot more about where the industry is at than anything that we did. But the brief history of it is, when I invested in that company originally and then bought the company several years ago, I kind of joke around with friends who were there at the time that, that was the deal that I probably took more, I'm not sure what the right word is, but I raised a lot of eyebrows, I guess I would say.
Oh, really?
I mean, a nice way to say it is I got a lot of pushback, and it was pushback from investors and then board members who were representing investors, who were the owners of the company. Certainly the sell side analysts, and a lot of the buy side analysts I talked to, and they were like, what the hell are you doing? I mean, that's crazy. But I will tell you at the same time, it was the easiest yes I've ever said. I mean, I worked really hard, and the whole team worked really hard to make that happen. It was the easiest decision I ever made, and as long as I can remember. But in the defense of the people who were skeptical, I'd say there were a couple of things. Number one, at one level, the mental models that are represented by what Embark did are completely different than most of the mental models operating in AAA online game development today. Another is that, remember, at that time, they didn't have any profit as a company. And usually when you're buying a company, especially large numbers, you're looking at a company, you want to buy a company that's profitable. Not only did they not have any profit, they didn't have any revenue. Not only did they have any revenue, they didn't have a product. And they were 3 years away by our, now clearly optimistic estimates of when they were going to come out with a product. And then beyond that, we all agreed that they were going to spend the first 9 months developing technology to enable them to make the types of products that they wanted to make and we wanted them to make. And so when we talked about and articulated to our investors, okay, here's what we're doing. We think there's a real yin and yang here of this fabulous group of developers who are operating at a level that people don't really operate in our industry. For the most part, they're very, very rare in terms of the level that they're operating. So we're lucky to have them. At the same time, one of the things that they were in the market for was understanding how we at Nexon made games like Maple Story and Dungeon Fighter grow for 20 years. And how is that possible? That was not in their, theories of what they could pull off. So it was a real yin and yang where their strengths were things that we wanted and our strengths were things that they wanted. And that's what you look for in M&A. So it was an easy decision for me and the management team to make, but it was very, very hard from the outside to understand it. So from that perspective, yeah, it's really gratifying. And I'm just thrilled for what they've done. I want to say it's exceeded my expectations, but my expectations were very high because I think they're just such a wonderful team on so many levels.
We had Patrick on the show a couple of weeks ago.
I thought, yeah, it was great.
And he was saying, and I think probably speaking to you about how when they launched the finals in 2021, I think it was 21, and how excited they got when all the numbers came in, but then everything came crashing down. And it seemed to be it was Nexon that sort of created it's all right, don't panic. There's just that, we've got a journey here. And he doesn't think that, at most other companies they would have got that far. They got to the point now where the game's profitable. And it's like it's just taken quite a while to get to that point.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things that Patrick's pointing to is something that I'm probably going to write my next blog about over the holiday. But, a game, you see this over and over in the games business. We experienced it when I was at Nexon numerous times. I've seen it around the industry numerous times, which is a new game launches, it pops. There's a lot of excitement, ton of downloads, and then the numbers drop. So when it pops, everybody says, oh, this is the greatest game ever. You got congratulations, it's a hit. And then it drops and everybody says, oh my God, it's a terrible failure. It is nowhere near what its peak number was, which is not the right anchor. And then what you see over time is it builds up over time. And we saw this, for example, with Maple Story Mobile. It did exactly that. It popped, it dropped. Everybody said, it's fizzled out. It's never coming back. It'll be like Farmville or something like that. And it'll never come back. And guess what? It's much bigger now, or at least when I was last at Nexon, it's much bigger than it ever was when it launched. You've seen that, as I recall, and I can't remember the exact numbers, but I think Apex Legends certainly went through that period. Mm-hmm. They had sort of a rough launch. It generated a ton of excitement and then became bigger than it ever was. And then these waves happen over very long periods of time, like No Man's Sky, right? Like when that came out, people said, oh, they're so excited about it. And then it became, kind of a laughing stock, I think very unfairly. And, it has come roaring back, slowly roaring back. So I really have a lot of respect for companies that understand that. I think it's a seriously misunderstood aspect of the games business, especially online games. And for investors, it creates enormous opportunity, of course, because the broader market misunderstands what a game can do. So there's a set of questions you can do to figure out that. When we were talking about the finals, I mean, if you play it, it's a really, really fun game to play. It had some issues. They could identify what those issues were. And then we know that if you fix them, it usually works out really well. And when you're talking about a team that's that talented and, that thoughtful, do that.
How do you know when not to be patient with it? Is it when it's not fun?
Well, at the risk of oversimplifying it, I think that is the answer. Mm. And if you can't see where it's fun, and if you can't see where the team is going to get it fun, then you're going to have problems ever making it be successful. It sounds glib to say, but in fact, I think it's much more profound. And it's a problem that our industry doesn't spend a lot more time thinking about that exact point or say that exact thing that you just said, which is, wait a minute, okay, is this fun to play? No, I'm not having a great time. I think Patrick mentioned in the interview that you had, certainly he and I spent hundreds of hours talking about this over the course of the development was, are we having a good time playing Arc Raiders right now? Well, yeah, we have these incredible moments. This is years ago, right? When they were earlier in development. Yeah, we have these incredibly high, interesting moments, but then we'll have periods where it's just not fun to play. Okay, well, what do we got to do about it? And so you can talk to a developer and see if they've got their head around it, if they can kind of light up the dark room and see where the parts are that aren't working, and then evaluate pretty quickly if they've got their head around it. But so much of especially around AAA, so much of the game development process is no longer like that. And I think that goes to part of what are the problems.
So that's 2 interviews there that tell the story of Arc Raiders, Embark and Nexon. And I think both interviews work really well side by side. If you have the time, please go back and listen. Now, before I sign off for the year, one topic that dominated 2025 was about the console war. We saw Xbox largely bowing out of the console race while Nintendo launched its new Switch 2 console in June. I spoke about all of this with former Nintendo of America president Reggie Fils-Aime in November. And here's what he had to say.
Let's talk a bit more broadly. What do you think of the console space generally right now? Because it's quite interesting with Microsoft. I mean, Xbox is stopping doing exclusive games. Sarah Bond called exclusive games antiquated. And PlayStation, even PlayStation's putting more of its games on PC. It certainly seems like a sector's going through quite a big change. What do you make of all that?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And I think between Sony and Xbox, I think there's different things going on. You know, I think from Sony's perspective, they have to be quite pleased with, you know, how they've launched their hardware. You know, the games that they've had for their system have been fantastic. And so now, you know, they're thinking, you know, how do we best monetize our software and bringing that onto PC? And PC gaming has had a bit of a resurgence these last number of years. It makes strong business sense for them.
Yeah.
Yeah. The team at Xbox, and you know, I'm very good friends with Phil. You know, I know the team there. They've, I think, tried to redefine what success looks like for them. It's no longer selling physical boxes. It is about getting their software out to as many players as possible. And so it was somewhat inevitable that, you know, they would have games that would be on a Sony system.
Yeah.
What I find surprising, I'm surprised that Xbox has not yet fully embraced the Switch 2 platform from a software perspective.
No.
That's the one that surprises me, because certainly some games could easily be ported over to Switch 2. And I have to say, I'm surprised that we haven't seen more of that. I thought there would be much more, especially during this time frame leading up into the holiday.
GameStop, who I know you had a brief dealings with, they declared the console war is over on social media. Do you agree?
Yeah, it was a good gimmick for them to do. Look, I do think that the years of direct competition, I think those times are done. And part of it is that, you know, with a large part now of, you know, the Xbox business being publishing, you know, by definition, they're a big third-party publisher that also makes some hardware.
Yeah.
And so from that standpoint, you know, they are no longer directly competing with Sony PlayStation business. And in fact, they need support from Sony, I think, for their software, for Microsoft software to reach the largest audience. Mm-hmm. And as I said earlier, I think it would be in their best interest to find ways for Xbox software beyond Minecraft to make its way onto the Nintendo platform.
Yeah.
So from that standpoint, you know, direct warfare is over. But you know, on the other hand, you know, gamers out there have limited budgets, whether they're, you know, older gamers like us or younger gamers like our kids, and so from that standpoint, for every dollar spent, you need to win for every minute spent playing. And so from that standpoint, there's always going to be a war going on. It may be below the surface, but there's always going to be a battle for attention and for mindshare.
That's it from our best of show. Honestly, there were so many others we could have featured, including our interview with Sega boss Shuji Itsumi, famous analyst Matthew Ball, Ubisoft's Lisa Opie, CD Projekt, we spoke to them. We spoke to a load of media and investors around what's going on in their worlds. Amir Savat was talking to us about the employment situation. We interviewed a bunch of retro companies, including Atari, Twitch's Dan Clancy, IO Interactive's Hakan Ambrak, Unity, Remedy's Sam Lake, plus our interviews that we only did last week, including with Bethesda's Todd Howard and Next Playground's Daniel Lee. Loads of stuff that we had to not feature in this episode, but I still think are very well worth a watch. Now, before we conclude, we're going to run one more clip. I'm a bit coy about this one, but our main back on the game business has been Geoff Keighley. He popped up on the show just before Christmas, and to send us off into the new year, here he is talking about this very podcast. But before I hand over to him, thank you for listening and watching this year. I can't wait to get going in 2026. I really can't. We've got a lot in store for you. So have a lovely holiday, and I'll see you in the new year. Now, here's Geoff.
It's Geoff Keighley. Hello, Geoff. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Chris. It's good to finally be on TG.
Yeah, it's you managed to stay away for the best part of 9 months.
I know. Congratulations. I'm really glad that you're doing this, and it's been amazing to see how it's growing, and I'm enjoying it. Obviously, I'm involved, but also I think you're serving a great role in the industry and have a lot of great content. So congratulations to you on a great first year.